at that point, things were still pretty pretentious, and often we would walk in somewhere and feel like a nuisance. So we saw that, and we saw the opportunity to make people not feel that way.
Welcome to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast, where you can learn to grow as a leader, inspire your team, and optimize the operations in your organization. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, and this week on the podcast, I interview Riley Westbrook of Valor Coffee. Valor Coffee is a specialty coffee cafe and roaster here in Metro Atlanta. They've got 2 locations now, and Riley and I talk about how to pair empathy with excellence in your organization. How can you be customers first and also keep a standard of excellence and make money for your business? So that's what I interviewed Riley about. If you want to learn how to bring the best out of your team, be sure to go to wavesbusinesscoaching.com, which is linked in the episode description. We would love to equip you with the tools and resources to optimize your business and give you peace of mind as a leader. Let's dive into my conversation with Riley Westbrook. Riley, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I know that Valor Coffee, I'm local to Atlanta, you're local to Atlanta. I know that you started Valor about 6 years ago, if I read that correctly on LinkedIn. But you started as a coffee cart. You've now got 2 cafes, one in Alpharetta, one in Dunwoody. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story and kind of your career journey with Valor.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jacob. I appreciate it. So the LinkedIn post, I think it just marked 6 years of being full-time with the business. If I'm not mistaken. It's funny that I can forget when I made that like a few days ago. But yeah, we started kind of back in August of 2016.
Yeah.
Myself and my business partners were 19 years old. So we had no clue what we were doing. Started a mobile coffee cart because we had $0 to our names. Ran a Kickstarter for $10K. Got a credit card and put $10,000 of debt on it at 0% interest for 15 months. And we said, if we can't pay it off by then we just aren't going to do this. And, by either luck or the grace of God, it happened.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a huge jump to just jump in and start your at 19 years old. I guess I didn't do the math of you were 19 whenever you started this, which is crazy. So, I mean, you started a coffee cart. I'm curious as a coffee fan, what kind of equipment did you buy for the coffee cart? Did you go like bare minimum, what you could afford at that time?
Definitely not. Yeah. I think we had enough experience at that point to understand the necessity of solid equipment. We had all worked on some pretty crappy espresso machines in a couple of our previous jobs, and we'd all been able to work on some decent espresso machines. So like we decided pretty quickly that we were going to get some solid gear. So got a La Marzocco GS3 and got a couple of Malkonig grinders, and that's kind of how we rolled. And we definitely don't regret it. That GS3 we actually sold to a wholesale account of ours, and it's still going. We got another one at some point, and we just kind of didn't need to. And then both of those grinders are still around as well. So no regrets on kind of splurging a little bit and putting ourselves in a little bit of debt. We felt a little comfortable at that point. We were either not married or engaged to our soon-to-be wives, all of us. And
there you go.
When you're at the bottom, you can't go any lower. So we were starting from very young, and I know a lot of people look at entrepreneurship as a risk, but it's not too risky when you haven't started a career and you don't have a mortgage and
That's right.
and debt to pay off. So even now, as we all of us are married and have a kid or two, and we've got to calculate our risk a little bit more,
Yeah.
But at that point, that's why when I talk to young people who are looking to get started, I'm like, why not?
No time like the present. So you guys started with the coffee cart. At what point did you transition to brick-and-mortar location with Valor?
Yeah, so we rolled with that for a long while. It helped all of us go full-time with the business because we were doing weddings, we were doing some film sets, some corporate events. But where that really transitioned was when we were able to land a permanent pop-up within Thrive Co-working in Alpharetta.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so we met one of the owners of the building that Thrive is going to be in just by catering a Halloween event in Vickery Village in Cumming. It's like a neighborhood,
Yeah.
and we were serving hot chocolates and like not making any money doing it. And because we did that, this guy walked up and he said, "Hey, like I own a building and a co-working space is starting in it. You guys should be there." So made that connection, landed there, and then it was, I think our first day was January 22nd, 2018.
Okay.
And that was my first day full time with the business. So from there, my partners Ethan and Ross in the months after kind of came on as well. But we landed there, and then a guy had an office on the front corner of this building that was like separate from Thrive.
Yeah.
About 1,200, 1,300 square feet office, and he was moving out, and we were able to sign that lease. And then I guess it was a year and some change later, we built out that space and moved up there and opened our first cafe.
That's amazing. And now, did y'all roast your own coffee at that point, or did that come later on?
It came in the process whenever we had that permanent pop-up set up. So January of 2018, that July, we started roasting our own, I believe. So we were lucky enough to use a couple of local roasters, their roasting setup over the time.
Oh, cool.
So that was kind of a lot of our philosophy was, if we don't have the equipment, if we don't have the space, that's not going to be an excuse for us to not do something. So fortunately, we made some good connections with Firelight Coffee in Atlanta and Peach Coffee Roasters in Johns Creek. And each of those, in order to kind of let us use their spaces and come in and rent their space and use their roaster as we learned. And then, so we were still roasting there even after we opened our first cafe.
Yeah.
And then we opened our first cafe in August of 2019. And then December of 2020, we opened our roasting headquarters. So, and that's where I'm standing now.
That's awesome, man. So I'm a big fan of Valor, and you guys have a podcast, the Valor Coffee podcast. And I was listening to an episode recently, and it really made me want to invite you on my podcast. And through us emailing back and forth, you actually came up with the title of this episode, which is Pairing Empathy with Excellence. And I want to dive in deeper there, but can you define empathy in the context of running your business at Valor?
Yeah, totally. So a lot of the reason we started this business was because myself and my partners, we grew up in either North Forsyth or Dawsonville, Georgia, about 50 miles north of Atlanta. And we were all kind of like musicians. So we would kind of get out of our city a little bit and, go to other cities and either play music at churches or venues or whatever. And so I don't know, we were like I don't know what to call it other than like the hipster kids of our school,
Yeah.
the kids that got made fun of, So, but with that, when we wanted to hang out somewhere, we wanted to hang out in Atlanta. So we would like 3 days a week, like drive from Dawsonville to Atlanta just to hang out and specifically to go to coffee shops.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the times when we did that, it was, still the, I wouldn't say the early days of the specialty movement by any means, but things have definitely changed since that point. At that point, things were still pretty pretentious, and often we would walk in somewhere and feel like a nuisance. So we saw that, and we saw the opportunity to make people not feel that way. And I have to give a lot of credit to Cat and Cloud. They were our first like wholesale partner, and they also have a coffee podcast. And through that podcast, we saw that you don't have to treat coffee like this ultra sacred thing, because coffee is awesome, but people and the interactions are where it's at.
Yeah.
So we saw a lot of what they were doing in that they served great coffee, but they weren't pretentious about it. So that kind of really opened our eyes to how we wanted to treat people going forward. And through that, we were thinking about that during our catering operation. And then now that's kind of the core ethos of our entire company. Our mission statement is to uplift people through coffee. And our vision statement is to match the top 1% of coffee with the top 1% of service. So you think about the most fancy, famous fine dining establishments, the 3 Michelin star places, they all have incredible food, things that are this big but look crazy. But they also have incredible service that would blow your mind. I've heard all these stories of these Danny Meyer restaurants where they have a couple is stressing out because they left a bottle of champagne in their freezer at home. And so their server takes their keys and takes the subway to their apartment and takes the champagne out of the freezer, but also leaves a box of caviar for them to enjoy later. Like insane stuff like that. But like, that's the stuff that gets us excited. Like I'm excited about anaerobic, natural Panama geisha coffee.
Yeah.
But I'm also excited about those instances where I can blow someone's mind and make a fan for life just by being nice and like doing something that makes me feel good too.
Make the best syrup, even though a latte they've ever had.
Oh,
and the interaction be that much better.
Exactly.
It sounds like you've read Unreasonable Hospitality. Have you?
I've got it around here somewhere. Yeah.
I was just on a live stream with Donald Miller and Will, the author of the book, and he was talking about an experience like that where he talked about how can you be hospitable and be transactional because you're a business. And that's a question he gets a lot. And he used the example of, and he's talking to a group of business coaches as he's sharing this, of like, the bills at his restaurant would be outrageously expensive. like the biggest bill you've ever paid for a meal. But when they brought the bill, they would also bring like a full unopened bottle of cognac and just set it on the table with glasses and then put the bill off to the side and be like, hey, this is on the house. We want you to enjoy this, like to cap off your evening. Bill's over here whenever you need it. But like also it's just another way to be unreasonably hospitable, which is really cool thinking about like adding hospitality to business. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you got to make money. You got to be profitable to keep the business, to keep building relationships and being hospitable. So 2 things you mentioned that I want to dive into. I am guilty of being a coffee snob. I'm definitely known that way to my friends just because I'm like, oh gosh, how can you go to Starbucks? How can you go to Dunkin' Donuts and drink that when, these geishas exist? Like I could blow your mind with a cup of coffee at home. They roast coffee very dark. You're in the world of specialty coffee, and you talked about this on a recent episode of your podcast of beverage size. Obviously, you and I are big like specialty coffee fans. You probably aren't drinking a 16-ounce coffee. Like when I make even a drip coffee at home, it's 8 ounces or less whenever I make it. But people want bigger drinks. Starbucks' grande size is a 16-ounce beverage, and that's the average. So how do you balance this, like meeting customer demand of obviously people are saying they want this larger size, but as a specialty coffee expert, you would say like excellence really isn't in the 16-ounce beverage. Like how do you match this meeting customer demand with excellence in a very specialty field?
Totally. Yeah. So I think step 1 is a little bit more backstory there. We started at the cart and our sizes reached their cap at 12 ounces. And we said, if you want to bring in your own mug, we'll fill it up and we won't upcharge.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go above that. And so shortly after that, we definitely had some pushback. There were people definitely talking about it. And then we all kind of grouped together and we said, in the spirit of us not just thinking we're right for the sake of being right, let's like sit down and experiment with this. Let's look at the numbers and then let's try to put ourselves in our guests' shoes. So there is the dichotomy of having a specialty product and also opening a coffee shop in a suburb location as really like the first third wave coffee shop in the area.
Yeah.
So when you put those two at each other, you can either choose to stand your ground and transparently and take the stance of, I'm going to educate the guest.
Yeah.
Or you can say, I'm going to meet the guests where they are and offer them the best version of what they are used to. And then through that, we can look at pathways to, educate them if they want to be educated.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the main thing. So, and ultimately, if we're being honest, that is a decision of, do I want to make money or do I want to make less money? So yeah, what's that?
I mean, that's just a simple business thing. I had a friend tell me your 2 tasks on your task list today should be, what can you do to make money today? And what can you do to make money tomorrow? And if selling a bigger beverage can make you money, again, that's going to keep you in business to keep doing what you want to do, which is make an impact on people.
Yeah. And so we ran the numbers and saw like, okay, we can make some more money here. We can make more people happy. And then beyond that, let's make the product. And like, because I think a lot of our hesitation was like, it's going to get cold too fast. We're like using double walled cups, and we tried it and we were like, okay, it doesn't get cold that fast. And if it does, like that's kind of just a part of it. So leaving that as the guest decision rather than our decision, and then maybe even steaming an extra 5 degrees on top to try to make it last a little longer. So I think even taking that path down the road, we were tasting the beverages and we were like, these aren't up to spec for us still. And so, because we were doing 2 shots regardless, and then just changing the quantity of milk.
Right.
And we were like, let's do 3 shots and 16-ounce lattes. We're going to have to raise the price, but like, it'll be a better product. Right. And we did. We had no pushback and only like positive and upside from that.
That's amazing. And again, I think it shows like, if I meet the customer where they are, they're willing to pay more for what they want. I mean, I'm definitely that way. So another thing you mentioned, going back to hospitality, part of my background, I came from Chick-fil-A, which I consider to be one of, if not the most hospitable companies in the world, number one in their field for sure. And I've seen what Chick-fil-A has done to create a hospitable environment in the restaurants and the intentionality behind it. What strategies do you use to create a positive and welcoming atmosphere in your cafes?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is guest first impressions. And so we thought about this a ton, and specifically all the way down to like the smallest details, because the details are really what matter. So when they walk in, what's the first thing they see? What's the first thing they smell? And what's the first thing they hear? So we had to really tailor certain things about our entire operation around that. So we made the decision early on that our cafes were going to be more of a social environment and a party than like a sleepy coffee house.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes against what I said before, because it's a matter of we definitely have complaints about our loud music, by all means. Like, that just happens.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, what hills are you willing to die on? But like, I think that for a lot of our target audience has amplified their experience with Valor, 1,000-fold, that like they can come in and sit down and have a drink and like look up, rather than like listening to like the acoustic music and kind of leaning back. So that is one way that we definitely do distinguish ourselves. But I would say that helps a lot with the guest first impressions, especially when there's a line out the door on Saturday. It kind of feels like a party. It feels a little more energetic, and helps our staff not feel as frantic, because they're kind of able to have fun. So beyond that, we want people to either walk in and be welcomed by the smell of coffee, or like the smell of a candle. So those sorts of things. And then all the way through, no confusion. If we see someone kind of walk in and not know where the line starts, help them in that process. Do all we can to make the line move quickly. And that's like a constant thing we're trying to improve on. Because funny, like oddly enough, when you approach a situation with hospitality, you have the situation where people just love our baristas and they want to get to the counter and they want to talk at the register for 2 minutes. Right. So how can we shepherd that well and not rush rush through an interaction? So we're constantly looking at how we can do things like that. But if it's someone's first time, we give them a first timer sticker.
Oh, wow.
That is kind of something that I think that we kind of incorporated that with like Disney stickers and pins. That's
Yep.
kind of where we got that idea a
That's
long time
great.
ago. But we've been doing that. So we have first timer stickers, we have birthday stickers, and then we have stickers that we give to kids that are just like little kind of cartoony things. So those low cost things that really help, make people feel seen and special,
Yep.
that, it's not gonna, if we buy stickers from here until the end of time, that's not going to put us out of business. It's only going to help us and help people remember that special moment, because moments are powerful. And if, without that, maybe we were just a different coffee shop, just another coffee shop on the block. So uh, those are the things that we think about. And then from that point on, moving people along in the process, still seeing them, still just, I mean, the power of asking someone how their day is going. Like, I feel like we were talking about this earlier today. We'll have experiences with guests where we don't feel like we're doing anything like that wild, but just because we asked them what they were doing for the weekend, they walk away from the experience like, this is the craziest hospitality I've ever received. So a little bit goes a long way for sure.
Well, especially because, I mean, in the food and beverage industry, I feel like hospitality has declined since 2020 and since COVID. And so y'all doing that well really sticks out and makes people think like, hey, I'll drive an extra 5-10 minutes or pay an extra $1-2 to go to Valor over somewhere else where I was just another transaction. I know I'm that way as a customer. So your team, they're the ones in the front lines. Not that you're not, but you have a lot of team members.
I'm not. I'm
Okay.
definitely not. Let's just be clear.
So they're seeing people every day. They're the ones greeting people when they walk in, making the beverages. How do you empower your team to contribute ideas and feedback to enhance both empathy and excellence in your business?
Man, so I think it all starts by, first of all, hiring the right people. So,
Yes.
which is hard because a lot of times we will have to, I think this is a really good principle in unreasonable hospitality as well. Their hiring process is very thorough, and we kind of have always matched that to some degree. Where we would rather extend the hiring process and have to bring ourselves more back into the operation, because in the long run, it's just going to be that much better for the team. And I would say that a
Yeah.
lot of our team would say that as well. We don't really ever stretch our team too thin, I would say. We always really try to cap people at 40 hours, obviously. But a lot of times people would rather you go that extra mile in finding the right person, the right fit, rather than rushing along and just getting someone who can fill some hours and it being the
Yeah.
wrong fit. So I would say it all starts there. Our leaders, including my partners, and then our cafe managers, are incredible at finding great people who, first of all, have a values alignment with our company. So
Yeah.
it all definitely starts there, because if you're already starting with someone who might even love coffee, but, not really like social interaction, then
Yeah.
where's that going to lead for us?
Right.
So we have definitely gone to the other side of that, which is, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, definitely has its cons, but we have barely hired people with coffee experience since we started this company.
Wow.
Pretty much everyone we've hired has been no experience in coffee, but pretty close alignment to our values. And that is why I think we have a team who can sustain the culture that we've tried to build, and then was there when it was just the three owners behind the bar.
That's good. At Chick-fil-A, I know a hiring principle is like character first, and then you get into competency. Like that's a lot less important, is like character fit. And then we
Yeah.
can teach pretty much anyone some of these skills, but it's hard to teach someone like their heart for guests and their heart for hospitality. So what advice would you give to other small business owners who might be listening or watching who are looking to integrate both empathy and excellence in their business and mesh those really well, like you have at Valor?
Yeah, I would say, I think so many people fall into just whatever their industry is, just the status quo of it. And
Yeah.
that is a pretty easy thing to do. And we do it ourselves. But if you're constantly challenging the status quo and saying, for example, like Starbucks has cold foam now. And for the longest time, we were like, we just like didn't even entertain the thought of doing cold foam. And then we were like, our value of challenging the status quo came in and said, why don't we just try cold foam? And we did. And we were like, okay, we can make this pretty well. This is pretty good. And then we did that. And then through that, again, like this all just fuels each other. First of all, now we can make money on cold foam, which is like awesome margin for us. Yep. And then beyond that, our guests absolutely love it. So I think there's so much of that. I'm not saying that you have to just like throw out all the principles, because a lot of the principles are there for good reason. Like caramel macchiato is such a classic drink order, but it just is a caramel latte. So we're not going to confuse our menu with both items.
Yep.
So, there's those sorts of things. But if you aren't going to give a guest, like one of our managers, Lillaby, she was in a specialty cafe recently, and she knows a lot about specialty coffee. She's worked in specialty coffee for a long time, but she likes honey in her cappuccino. And like, this girl knows how to dial in espresso really well. She knows how to make coffee really, really well. And she asked for a honey cappuccino at a specialty coffee shop, and they went on a rant to her about how that's not how you're not supposed to drink a cappuccino. And really wanted to explain to her that basically just that she was wrong for wanting that. And she said at the end of that interaction, she was like, okay, thank you for caring about that so much. I'm still gonna have the honey cappuccino. But those sorts of things, it's not gonna hurt you to do something a certain way.
Yeah.
I will put pretty much anything that's not going to harm a guest in a cup and hand it out. And our entire staff is like that. It's not, don't let some sort of industry norm lead you down a path so far that it's going to detract from your guest experience, because that's only going to hinder you and your growth in the long term.
I love that. Riley, where can our listeners and watchers find out more about you or Valor?
Yeah, so we have a podcast, the Valor Coffee podcast. We're on all podcast platforms, and obviously have 2 cafes here in Metro Atlanta, one in downtown Alpharetta and another one in Dunwoody Village. And if you're far away, you can try our coffee by buying it online at valor.coffee. We've got pretty much all of our coffee offerings there. So even if you're not close, you can give it a shot.
I'm looking at it right now. You've got a new Kenyan coffee in there, got a new Honduras coffee in there. So looking forward to getting some myself. Riley, thank you so much for being on the Waves Business Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jacob.
Thanks. Take care. Thank you so much to Riley for being on this episode. I really enjoyed our interview and our conversation about Valor and how they have a guest first mindset, with also having a standard of excellence and doing things really, really well at Valor. If you want to learn more about Valor or buy some coffee from Valor, which I would highly recommend, they roast incredible coffee, or visit their cafes if you're in the Metro Atlanta area. I've linked some episode about Riley and Valor below that you can go to and check that out as well. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. For more free tools and resources of how you can grow your organization, be sure to subscribe to the podcast here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Organizations struggle to grow because they don't know how to bring the best out of their people. At Waves Business Coaching, we inspire teams and optimize operations so that you and your organization can thrive. If you're a business leader and you want help to bring the best out of your team, be sure to visit our website at wavesbusinesscoaching.com, which is linked in the episode description. If you'd just like a free plan to optimize your business, take my business report, which is also linked in the episode description. In this free assessment, you'll get a diagnosis and plan to optimize your business. This report from Business Made Simple we'll do in 10 minutes, but many business consultants take weeks or months to do. be sure to click the link in the episode description to take my business report. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. Take care.